I thought it was just a quiet evening with a few older friends, but when the
Udача.
laughter faded and the room grew still, they looked at me and whispered, "We're all 45 and single. You're not leaving tonight." I hadn't planned on staying long that evening. Honestly, I thought I was just stopping by to be polite. A neighbor of mine, graceful, mid-40s, always carrying herself with the kind of poise that makes you straighten your back when she looks your way, had invited me over for a small gathering. I expected a couple of people, maybe some casual tea, and then I'd slip away. But when I walked in, the scene was nothing like I had imagined. The living room glowed with soft lamplight, golden and warm, stretching shadows across shelves lined with books and framed photographs. The faint scent of wine mixed with perfume, carrying something both inviting and slightly intoxicating. Laughter was already spilling through the air, not the careless kind you hear at loud parties, but something softer, richer. There were 4 women there. Each of them around 45, though they wore the number differently, one with a streak of silver in her hair that somehow made her look more striking, another with eyes that seemed to catch the light in ways I couldn't stop noticing. They turned to me as I entered, their voices lifting in playful welcome. "Finally, he's here," one of them teased, her tone half sarcasm, half flirtation. I laughed awkwardly, brushing a hand through my hair, suddenly aware of how young I must look to them. They drew me into their circle quickly. One poured me a glass of red wine, her fingers grazing mine as she passed it over, an accidental touch that felt anything but accidental. Another gestured for me to sit on the couch beside her, and when I did, her knee brushed lightly against mine. The touch was small, subtle, but it stayed there, neither of us shifting away. I listened as they spoke, about work, about the strangeness of being single at their age, about the way people sometimes look at them as though life is supposed to have ended already. They weren't bitter, though. If anything, they were confident, their words threaded with humor and wit. But beneath it, I sensed something else, a quiet vulnerability they carried like a hidden weight. I tried to add to the conversation, but more often I found myself simply watching, noticing things I normally wouldn't. The way one of them tilted her head when she laughed, exposing the elegant line of her neck. The way another leaned forward when she spoke, her hand brushing my shoulder casually, as though it belonged there. I felt out of place, yes, but also strangely wanted. Not the kind of attention you get in crowded rooms or noisy clubs. This was different. More intentional. More dangerous, maybe. And yet, instead of pulling away, I leaned into it. I let the closeness wash over me, let the sound of their voices settle into me like warmth I hadn't realized I was missing. That night was supposed to be ordinary. A simple visit. But looking back, I think I knew from the very first moment, from the glow of the lamps, from the touch of that first glass pressed into my hand, that nothing about the evening was going to be ordinary at all. It didn't take long for the room to pull me in. Their voices overlapped in waves, stories about old friendships, childhood mischief, and half-finished dreams. And somehow, instead of feeling like the outsider, I found myself at the very center of it all. The woman sitting beside me leaned closer as she spoke, her laughter spilling out like music. Her knee pressed lightly against mine, and though either of us could have shifted, neither of us did. The warmth of that touch, barely there, but steady, began to anchor me in a way I didn't expect. One of them, her hair tied back in a loose bun, with a strand slipping free against her cheek, suddenly reached toward me. "Hold still," she said with a little smile. Before I could ask why, her fingers brushed against my collar, straightening it as if she had every right to. The gesture was simple, almost maternal, but the softness of her fingertips against my neck sent a surprising current through me. "Better," she said, her eyes meeting mine for just a second too long before she pulled her hand back. I laughed awkwardly, trying to cover how that tiny moment had unsettled me. But then another leaned in, handing me a plate of food, her perfume slipping into the air between us. It was floral, faint but unforgettable, the kind of scent that lingers long after someone leaves the room. It was strange, how quickly my nerves turned into ease. Normally, sitting in a room of people twice my age might have made me feel like a child, or at least like I didn't belong. But with them, it wasn't like that at all. They weren't treating me as the young one. They were listening. Laughing at my stories. Asking questions as if they genuinely wanted to know me, not just out of politeness. And in return, I found myself watching them differently. Noticing their gestures, the quiet confidence in the way they carried themselves. There was nothing rushed about them, nothing hurried or restless like women my own age. Every word, every touch, seemed intentional. At one point, the woman beside me rested her hand on my forearm as she told a story. She wasn't even aware of it, I think, her fingers lying there, warm through the thin fabric of my sleeve. My heart, however, noticed immediately. That small weight of her touch, it silenced the room inside my chest. When the story ended, they all laughed, but I barely heard it. I was too aware of her hand, too aware of how natural it felt for her to leave it there. And I realized something then. I wasn't just being tolerated in this room. I was being included. Drawn in. Seen, not as a boy out of place, but as a man who, for some reason, belonged here among them. That realization shifted something deep inside me. I sat a little straighter, listened a little closer. And though I couldn't have said it out loud, a part of me didn't want the night to end. As the evening went on, the laughter softened, and the conversation stretched into something deeper. The playful teasing gave way to moments of silence, comfortable at first, then waited, as if someone was on the edge of saying what really needed to be said. It was Clara, the one with the silver strand cutting elegantly through her dark hair, who spoke first. She swirled her glass of wine, eyes fixed on the floor instead of us. "You know," she said quietly, "sometimes I wonder if people even see me anymore. Not the woman I am now, but, just me." The room grew still, her words hanging there like something fragile. Another woman, Nora, let out a soft laugh, though her voice trembled at the edges. "At our age, people stop asking how you're doing. They ask if you're married, or if you've got kids. And when the answer is no, it's like, the conversation ends right there." I sat back, the weight of their words settling into me. Their confidence, their easy charm, suddenly revealed cracks beneath the surface. They weren't just strong, self-assured women. They were women who had been told, over and over again, that the world had moved past them. I didn't know what to say at first. At 24, what right did I have to answer? But silence felt wrong, too. So I leaned forward, careful, sincere. "I see you," I said softly. "And I don't mean just tonight. I mean, I think you're extraordinary. All of you." The words surprised even me, but they felt true. For a moment, no one spoke. Clara finally looked up, her eyes searching mine. And then, slowly, a smile tugged at the corner of her mouth, not wide, but genuine. Beside me, Nora's hand slipped onto my forearm, steadying herself as if she needed the contact to keep her voice from breaking. "You don't know how much it means to hear that," she whispered. Her touch was light, almost hesitant, but I felt the warmth of her skin through my sleeve, the faint tremor in her fingertips. I didn't pull away. I couldn't. Instead, I let my arm remain still beneath her hand, as though anchoring her in place. The others nodded in quiet agreement, their eyes softer now, their smiles tinged with something vulnerable. For the first time that evening, they weren't the ones holding control of the conversation. They weren't the confident women laughing and teasing. They were simply, human. Honest. I realized then how rare it must be for them to let anyone see this side. To be this open. And in some unexplainable way, I felt honored, like they had let me into a part of themselves usually locked away. My chest tightened with something I couldn't quite name. Maybe it was protectiveness. Maybe it was admiration. Or maybe it was the quiet, dangerous beginning of something else. Whatever it was, it rooted me even deeper in that room. I wasn't just a guest anymore. I was part of the moment, part of their confession, part of the silence that followed. And it felt impossible to walk away. After that moment of raw honesty, the air in the room felt heavier, gentle, but weighted. For a while, we just sat in it, sipping our drinks in thoughtful silence. But then, as if on cue, Nora clapped her hands together and leaned forward with a mischievous grin. "All right," she said, "enough of this serious talk. We're not here to scare the poor boy away." The others laughed, and I couldn't help but join in, though my heart was still racing from the earlier exchange. Clara shook her head, rolling her eyes affectionately. "He's not scared. Look at him. He's still sitting here, isn't he?" "Barely," I teased back, raising my glass. The tension eased instantly, and they all smiled as though I'd passed some unspoken test. Then came the games. Someone pulled out a deck of cards, another suggested a round of silly dares. It wasn't anything serious, just playful, harmless fun, but the mood had shifted into something more alive, more dangerous in its own way. When it was my turn to play, Nora leaned in close, her shoulder brushing mine. She shielded her cards against her chest, whispering, "Don't you dare peek." Her breath grazed my ear, warm and teasing, and my skin prickled from the nearness. "I wouldn't dream of it," I whispered back, though the closeness made my words come out tighter than I intended. Across the table, Clara caught the exchange, her eyebrow arching in mock suspicion. "Are you two conspiring?" "Not at all," Nora said, smirking as she tapped my knee with the back of her hand. The touch was quick, playful, but it lingered in my body long after. The game went on like that, laughter, teasing, brushes of contact that could almost be explained away as accidental, but weren't. Every time one of them leaned close to whisper a joke, or laughed with a hand on my arm, I felt the current between us growing stronger. At one point, I lost spectacularly in a round, and Clara reached over, ruffling my hair like I was some mischievous kid. But her fingers lingered just a second too long, trailing down to the back of my neck before pulling away. My breath caught, though I forced myself to laugh with the rest. "You'll have to do better than that if you want to survive in this room," she teased, her eyes glinting with something more than amusement. And for the first time all night, I didn't feel like the youngest in the room anymore. The teasing, the glances, the subtle touches, they weren't treating me like a boy. They were inviting me into their world, into their rhythm, into something I was only beginning to understand. It was still light-hearted, still wrapped in laughter and games. But beneath it, there was an undercurrent I couldn't ignore, an energy that hummed quietly, drawing me closer to them with every passing minute. And though none of us said it out loud, I think we all felt it, the shift from playful company to something more intimate, more magnetic, more inevitable. The laughter carried us late into the evening, but like all bursts of joy, it eventually softened, tapering into something quieter. The cards were set aside, the dares forgotten. Music played low in the background, an old jazz tune, faint and velvety, and the glow of the lamp seemed dimmer now, as if the house itself understood the shift in mood. The room grew still. Not uncomfortable, but heavy, like the kind of silence you don't want to break. Clara rose first, gathering the empty glasses. "You all sit," she said softly. "I'll take these." Her voice wasn't commanding anymore, it was gentle, almost tender. I watched her walk into the kitchen, the silver in her hair catching the light, and for reasons I couldn't quite name, my chest tightened. When she returned, she didn't take her original seat. Instead, she sank onto the couch beside me, just close enough that the edge of her shoulder brushed against mine. The contact was faint, almost accidental, yet I could feel the warmth of her body radiating through the space between us. Nora shifted too, curling against the opposite side of me. She tucked her legs beneath herself, leaning so that her head rested lightly against my arm. I froze at first, unsure if I should move, but when she sighed softly, as though settling into a place she'd been meant to be, I let myself relax. I was surrounded, literally, by their nearness. And I couldn't help but notice the details, the softness of Nora's hair against my sleeve, the subtle brush of Clara's shoulder each time she adjusted her posture, the faint notes of perfume and wine that lingered in the air. For a while, no one spoke. The only sounds were the muted trumpet from the stereo and the rhythm of quiet breathing. And yet that silence spoke louder than anything else that evening. It carried tension, unspoken but undeniable, like all of us were waiting for something, though none of us dared name it. I glanced at Clara. She was gazing at the floor, but her hand rested so close to mine on the cushion that all it would have taken was the slightest shift of a finger for our skin to touch. My heart thudded hard against my ribs, as though it already knew what would happen if I closed that distance. Instead, I stayed still. Let the silence stretch. Let it bind us tighter. Nora stirred, her cheek brushing against my arm as she shifted slightly closer. "You're warm," she murmured, almost like a confession. I swallowed, my throat dry. "So are you," I managed, my voice low, almost breaking. That made her smile, I could feel it against my sleeve. The others sat across from us, watching quietly, their eyes softer than before. No one teased now, no one joked. There was no need. The playfulness of earlier had melted into something deeper, something far more dangerous and far more honest. And in that charged stillness, I realized the truth: I wasn't just welcome in this room anymore. I was wanted. Desired. Needed. And the weight of that realization left me both terrified, and unable to imagine leaving. The quiet stretched long enough that I thought it might lull us into sleep. Nora still leaned against my arm, her head resting like it belonged there. Clara's shoulder brushed mine with every subtle shift of her breathing. Across the room, the others sat in thoughtful silence, their eyes flickering toward me now and then, as though they were waiting. I cleared my throat softly. "It's getting late," I said, though even as the words left me, I didn't believe them. The thought of leaving this cocoon of warmth, this strange but comforting closeness, felt impossible. Clara turned her head, her gaze steady on me. There was no smile now, no playful mask. Just her eyes, calm, searching, certain. She leaned ever so slightly closer, and in a voice low enough that I almost missed it, she said, "We're all 45, and single." The words carried more than fact. They carried years of solitude, quiet longing, the sharp ache of nights spent alone. They carried a kind of permission too, permission to want, permission to feel, permission to reach for something unorthodox but true. Before I could respond, Nora lifted her head from my arm. Her hand slid down to mine, her fingers brushing lightly at first, then threading through with gentle insistence. "You're not leaving tonight," she whispered, echoing Clara's words but softening them with warmth. The others exchanged glances, small, knowing smiles playing on their lips. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a dare. It was an invitation. A request. A truth spoken aloud. My heart thundered in my chest. Part of me wanted to protest, to remind them of the obvious, the age, the difference, the way the world might see this. But another part, the louder part, only felt the pull of the moment. The closeness. The intimacy that had been building all evening, subtle but undeniable. Clara's hand reached across the small space between us, resting lightly against my back. Her palm was warm, steadying. The touch wasn't urgent. It was reassurance, an anchor, as if to say, "You're safe here. We want you here." I looked from one woman to the next. In their eyes, I didn't see mockery or temptation. I saw longing. I saw tenderness. I saw a kind of need that mirrored my own, the desire to be known, to be held, to belong. Slowly, I exhaled. My hand tightened around Nora's, returning the pressure she'd offered. And in that simple gesture, something shifted in the room. The air grew lighter, warmer, as though my acceptance had been the final piece they were waiting for. No one cheered. No one spoke. Instead, they leaned closer, shoulders brushing, knees touching, arms finding their way around me one by one. And for the first time all night, I stopped thinking about how this would look from the outside. Because from the inside, it felt perfect. And as their warmth folded around me, I knew with absolute certainty, they had been right. I wasn't leaving tonight. The night slowed into something timeless. There was no rush, no need to move, no need to explain. We simply existed together in that quiet space, shoulders brushing, hands joined, warmth shared. The earlier laughter and teasing had faded, leaving behind only softness, like the last glow of a candle that refuses to go out. Someone pulled a blanket from the armchair and draped it across us, tucking it lightly around my shoulders as though I belonged there. The fabric was soft, carrying the faint scent of their home, and as it settled over us, so did a feeling of safety. We didn't talk much after that. Words had already done their work earlier in the evening. Now it was silence that carried meaning. Nora leaned fully into me, her head against my chest. I could feel the quiet rhythm of her breathing, steady and calm, syncing with my own. Clara rested her hand lightly on my arm, not gripping, just present. Across from me, the others curled up close, their eyes softened, their postures relaxed, their barriers long since fallen away. For the first time all night, I let myself close my eyes. Not because I was tired, but because I wanted to feel everything more clearly, the press of a hand on my chest, the brush of hair against my jaw, the simple, grounding truth of being surrounded. My thoughts drifted. I realized how rare this was, not romance in the way movies show it, not wild passion or sweeping declarations, but something far more human. Companionship. Belonging. The kind of closeness that makes the outside world feel unnecessary. I thought about what they had said earlier, we're all 45 and single. I understood it differently now. It wasn't just a fact. It was a declaration of longing, of hope. It was an invitation for someone to step into the silence of their lives and fill it, even if just for a night, with presence. And somehow, that someone had been me. Hours passed in a haze of warmth. One by one, the women's breathing deepened, their bodies relaxing against me. I stayed still, letting them rest, my heart impossibly full. I had come here expecting nothing more than polite conversation, maybe a quick drink before heading home. Instead, I had found something far more meaningful, connection that would stay with me long after the night ended. Eventually, sleep tugged at my own eyelids. As I drifted off, wrapped in their nearness, one last thought anchored itself in my chest: I hadn't just stayed because they asked me to. I stayed because, for the first time in a long while, I felt like I belonged. And in that belonging, I found peace. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?